All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the February 2021 Development Discourse. Our topic for today is getting elephants to dance. Essentially, how do we transform public sector organizations to become more nimble and focused on results? My guest was about 35 years when he became the youngest Corps Marshal for the Federal Road Safety Corps. And also the first civilian in that role. Prior to that appointment, he had graduated with a bachelor's in management from University of Nigeria, Enugu campus, got a diploma in marine and port administration from the University of Singapore, master's in transport policy and logistics from the School of Public Policy at George Mason University. He worked at various times for the Federal Capital Development Authority, ExxonMobil. He served as special advisor to a number of ministers. He's confidant to at least two presidents that we know of, Obasanjo and President Jonathan. He was Corps Marshal from 2007 to 2014, and then Honorable Minister of Aviation from 2014 to 2015. And then he left and went back to the university as an undergraduate law student at Bayes University. He also was head of strategy for the People's Democratic Party. Osita Chidoka, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Patrick. A pleasure to be on this conversation. Excellent.
I hear congratulations is also in order that you've graduated as a law student, right?
Or no? Yes. Congratulations is in order.
Excellent. Okay, so let's jump right into it. The conversation we're having today actually was triggered by some project you had next year do for you when you were Corps Marshal to chronicle the on road safety from 2007 to 2012. And we found some of it, quite fascinating. I would like to focus more on, how you transform that largely moribund organization, to become more flexible and more nimble, to see if there are lessons that we can take from there to other efforts at public service reforms. So if you could paint for us a picture of the road safety you met in 2007 and where you left it in 2014.
Thank you very much. That will be a whole week's journey. But let me summarize by saying that the Federal Road Safety Commission in 2007 that I met was an organization that was living in its past. At the time it was founded in 1988, it was a group of young men fresh from university, gone to the ideals of service without corruption, spread along Nigerian roads with 504 station wagons. You see them leading patrols, vehicles driving behind them. They will not accept a bribe. They will not misbehave on the road. And everybody loved FRSC because also in Nobel laureate, Wole Soyinka was his chairman, and then Agunloye was the Corps Marshal. So there were so many things going for the organization that it was one of those organizations that a lot of people had very high regards for. But that was 1988. Throughout the military rule, down to the 90s, by the time we got to the 90s, FRSC was in a crisis of itself. The population has grown, vehicles have grown, but the organization has not grown. Mm-hmm. And also the strategies of the organization remained largely very analog. So when I took over in 2007, there were no computers in offices. In fact, a good way to tell you the situation I met was that I got in on June 11th, and then on June 14th, I was confronted with a stack of checkbooks. Those checkbooks were for me to sign the checks for the salaries of the staff to be distributed. A staff would take it from Abuja. They will send 12 staff to the 12 zonal commands to deposit the checks in those zonal, in the banks there, so that staff salaries could be paid. And I said to them, why am I signing these checks? They said, yeah, so that salaries can be paid. And I said, is there no other way to pay the salaries without me signing checkbooks? They said, there's no other way. This is the way how we do it. Anyway, I said to them, this will be the last set of checks I will sign. Please contact Diamond Bank, UBA, Zenith, and find out if they have salary payment portals so that we can do that instead of doing this signing of checks every week. And so that was the FRSC I met, was that when I told the officers to come and brief me, only one officer came with a PowerPoint presentation. The rest of the officers came with notebooks, some came with typed documents. Their secretaries had typed it in electric typewriters. So it was such that I knew that we had a difficult problem. One, an organization living in its past glory. Two, an organization refusing to adapt modern technology. Three, an organization without a vision of its future. So I said, for us to be able to begin to work this, we need to first of all develop a sense of an organization in crisis. Mm-hmm. So I started by saying, you know what, we're not doing this anymore. This will not happen. That will not happen. Everybody must come with a PowerPoint presentation. Everybody must come to management meeting with a presentation typed and circulated. I must get reports by my email. Then it was at my Yahoo Mail. Mm-hmm. And such declaration of crisis was the first impetus, the first push. Everybody kind of pushed back and they were like, what's going on here? But to put it in a larger context, I think it helped me develop the four-step approach that I think any organization should adopt in the public sector. The first one in it is knowledge, know the organization. So I went around the whole FRSC command by road. I went from command to command, from state commands. I stopped on the highways. I spoke to the officers. I saw the offices. All the offices were decrepit. All the offices were like police stations. The culture, after having been merged with the police, they had adopted some very police culture. Gossip was the order of the day. Backbiting was what made people move forward in the organization, going to the call marshal and telling him those that are conspiring against you. So as I went around the organization, I got a sense of the people that I'm dealing with. So first thing you must do when you get into an organization is to know the organization. And knowing the organization means you have to leave your air-conditioned office and get to the road. And getting to the road was very, very revealing. By the time I came back from that tour of the commands, talking with the officers, I had a good sense of what needs to be done. The second stage I adopted was to say, let us have a vision. Now that I know the organization and I know the problem, let's have a vision. What do we want to be? Who do we want to be? So we set up a committee and we called it the FRSC Vision Committee. We said we will change our mission, our vision. We will reassert ourselves into the consciousness of government. At that time, the Yar'Adua government had the 7-point agenda. I said, how do you find FRSC in that 7-point agenda? What's our role in achieving this 7-point agenda? So that gave us the opportunity to start a visioning process. And because I had gone around the commands, I said, you must take this process down to every command. All the officers must meet. All the special marshals must meet. And I must see evidence of that meeting and evidence of their opinion. And by the time we collated all that came from the field commands, came from everybody, we were in for a great shock. Because it was obvious that the people that were in the forefront of the organization were not the best and the brightest. That the best and the brightest were ensconced in different commands. They couldn't lobby. They didn't have access to the powers that be. So nobody knew about them. Mm-hmm. So that took me to the third step. Mm-hmm. Third step. And that third step was to engage. I felt that we needed to engage with this our vision. Now we're thinking of a vision, we need to engage the staff. And one of the ways I thought we could engage the staff was by bringing in what I call the performance management system.
Correct.
A way that will make it possible for the officers that were hidden, that were not available to the stars in Abuja, that were not seen by the call marshal, to bring them up to light. And that performance management system was linked strongly to the assessment of the commands. So all of a sudden, we saw people that we never heard of coming first in the zonal command evaluation. We saw departments that I thought were high performers coming to the bottom of the evaluation. And what was interesting was that that evaluation mechanism was developed by the officers. We hired a consultant, Restral Consulting, who sat down with us.
Ifueko's group, right?
Ifueko's group, yes. It was an amazing group then, led by a nice lady, Owa Osa. Yes, she was fantastic. She understood my challenges and she thought of how to get us, up and running. So one of the key features of that performance management was that it was developed by the officers. It wasn't something we brought from McKinsey or we got from PwC. We got it from the officers. We sat down and said, what is it that we would like to evaluate? What do you feel we should evaluate? And by the time we came up with the basis of the evaluation, it was accepted by all the officers. Then I said to myself, in engaging these officers, we must put in a transparent promotion system. So I gave an order. 2010, everybody must write an online examination for promotion. All the performance evaluation will have been done and the result known, and then you go for the written exam. And when you finish writing the exam, you go for the interview. For the senior officers who came to interview with me, I decided that to avoid any feeling that will make us feel that any group is being discriminated against, I got a Northern professor and a Southern professor to set the exam and to mark the exams. So the two of them will mark the exams and give one grade for each officer. So there was no question of who liked who. They didn't know whose papers they were marking because we didn't put names on the answer script. We just wrote a number. So when they finished marking and we brought out the results, when you come for the interview, the first thing we did was to give you your answer script and ask you, are you okay with the score? If you are not okay, you can redo the exam. And in all my time in FRSC, only 2 people said they were not okay with the results. So we said, okay, those 2 people that were not okay, they asked for a remarking. We sent a neutral third party to remark and they scored lower than they scored in the first set of markings. And I then threatened to publish their results, to publish it to all the staff. 2 of them came to beg me that they didn't want it published. So, but in any event, what happened was that the officers accepted that, saw in that promotion system a fair and honest system with integrity. So it was easy for us to combine our knowledge of the system, our common vision, our engagement with the staff, and then also to now go to the issue of how we will sustain this going forward. I will talk about that later in the conversation. But these 3 steps were not one after the other. They were all going simultaneously because I found out that I had only 48 months, which meant that every 4 months of my first term was 10% of my time. Correct. So I timed all the projects to my timing, that by the time I've done 75% of my time in FRSC, all the key projects will have been done. So we reviewed the highway code, we reviewed the FRSC staff, we reviewed the FRSC Act itself, we reviewed the staff handbook. So we made sure that all the issues that we're discussing was now reflected in our handbook, our new promotion process, our new visioning process, our new performance management system. We made sure that entered into our conditions of service and our handbook. And what was interesting with all of that was that if you passed FRSC offices by 7, 8 in the night, you saw people in the office working. Everybody was engaged. Everybody was involved. And they saw that nobody could now hide because every department was now, being watched. We had an office called the Project Implementation Office. Their job was to go department by department, zone by zone, and make sure that what you said you would do, that you are doing it. Then, of course, to make all of this happen and work, we needed to embrace technology. So the first thing we did was in 2008, we did a recruitment of 250 ICT staff, spread them across the office. We decided that we wanted our own email system. So we contacted Google and said we wanted that FRSC email running on Gmail. They said it would be $50 per staff at that time. With 10,000 plus staff, $50 a year, I said I couldn't afford it. So we said, let's build our own email system using Microsoft Outlook. And to our chagrin, we went to NITDA, a government agency, national, I don't know what the full name, NITDA. And they told us that they have licenses for Microsoft and Oracle that President Obasanjo had negotiated a global discount for Nigeria, and they've actually bought those software. So if we want it, we could have it for free. So our first email at Outlook, our first email server was got for free from NIDA. We installed it and we got all the stuff at FRSC.gov.ng. And then I issued another order. Nobody should communicate with me outside of the FRSC email system. But what that meant was that officers in the command said they didn't have access to internet, and there was no way they had to go and buy. Internet was not as easy as it was now today. So we then went to another government agency called Galaxy Backbone, who had 5,000 VSATs bought for a police project, but the police was not off-taking it. The police were not installing the VSATs. So they gave us 450 VSATs. All FRSC offices became connected via a VPN. Yes, we had all our offices connected within a space of 6 months. As they were installing, we were doing the local cabling, we were buying computers, and we were setting up systems and Wi-Fi spots in the offices. So people came to work every day and they logged into the system. They were able to see what was happening in Abuja. They were able to, make their daily reports. So something like our accident reports, which I used to see at the end of a quarter and which we normally celebrated at the end of the year. I said, we're not undertakers. We need to be able to look at what's happening and see how we can correct the problem. So from getting it weekly, which was the best they said they could do, I moved it to daily. So at the end of every day by 9 p.m., I got a mail from operations telling me how many crashes had happened around the country, how many people died, and which locations these were happening. So our operational plans every week reacted to the accidents we saw the previous week. We now shifted operational teams from where they were to where we were having the crashes. And that helped us in our achieving reduction in road crashes. So it's a very long tail of balls in the air, but the key is that there is no way we can build a modern nation without building a modern public service, an organization ready to deliver on its results.
Interesting. So I have a few questions, and one of them is, there's this whole thing about not too young to run, right? So when you got to FRSC, you were 35. Yes. How much of your age and dynamism do you attribute to the success? Or how much of the success do you attribute to the age and dynamism that comes with that age? And how much of it do you attribute to being an outsider to the system or being sufficiently, trained and qualified, for that role? Again, what I'm seeking here is, are there lines we can draw and extract as things we must do, to fix some of these public sector organizations that we have?
So the answer is that I attribute 90% of my success to my youthfulness. The reason is that if I were today to become Corps Marshal, I have too many engagements. I have too many things I fear. There are too many things I know today that I won't dabble into so many of the very high risky things I did. For instance, even the issue of recruitment, I set up a recruitment process. My people were getting ready for the recruitment. Honorable members were giving me names. People were sending lists. I just outsourced it to JAMB. And I said to JAMB, you will conduct these exams, you will publish the result the following day, and we will announce the winners, the people that we have employed the day after. So there was no time for lobbying. Before people could get used to lobbying me, we had already published the result. Now, that cost me a lot politically, but I didn't have any I didn't care, because at that time, the only thing I saw was that I wanted to give opportunity to young people who wanted the job, not those who went through their brothers and their politically connected ones. If I were to do it today, I would start considering, what would the speaker say? What would the Senate president tell me? What will the president say? I can tell you that somebody that was close to President Jonathan came with a list to me and said, this is the list from Oga. I said, we don't have list here. Tell the people to go and apply. So somebody told me, you don't do that to the president. Better go and explain this to the president before they blackmail you before him. So I went to the president. I said, sir, they brought this list. And I said, the president said, Me, I don't know anything about any list. People come here every day looking for work and people send all kinds of lists. Please, whatever is the procedure of your organization, follow it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of emboldened me. So I am of the view that for us to shake up Nigeria, we need to bring young people in who are competent and qualified, because they will not have the hang-ups that we have as we age, the connections that we have developed, the friendships we have developed, and the safety that we're looking at. Because we're looking at retirement, and you don't want enemies all over the place as you retire. But at 35, I didn't care about enemies. I mean, I didn't think there was any problem with having enemies. So I think that we need once in a while to shake up our systems by bringing very young people up and allowing them make their mistakes, learn from it, and bring in the boldness required.
Okay, what of outsiders?
The outsider part is actually a very critical fact, because what many of organizations are doing today, the way they look at the organization, the way they see the organization is now a function of their own survival and their own personal aggrandizement. So when you bring in an outsider, the first thing that happens is, why are we doing this like this? I think that for us to shake up institutions, and I like what the Americans do in this regard, the director of CIA is never a CIA staff. The deputy director is, you can be a former CIA staff to come back as a director, but there's always an outsider, a politician, somebody who comes, who is likely going to say, why are you sending me this report like this? Or why are we doing that? So the Americans have figured out a way of introducing outsiders to organizations. Look at the quantity of appointments being made by Biden across all organizations that are bringing in new people with a certain political mindset, with a new way of looking at things to be able to change things. I think that the incestuous relationship we're having in organizations now, where people grow from organizations and get to the top, has its merits, but its greatest demerit is that that organization can never change. Because getting to the top is already known by his colleagues. He's already part of the wrath. He cannot come and preach to the choir because he was part of the choir. So once in a while, we will need an outsider to take a look at our organizations.
We'll get into the performance management system because I think there's a lot to learn and unpack there. But there's also an argument that maybe you were successful because you had political godfathers, right? So you already had a good relationship with President Obasanjo, who at the beginnings, 2007, 2008, was still a very strong force. And then you had, someone like Nojo Madekwe, who knew the political terrain, God bless his soul, as a mentor. So can one also say that you can attribute some of the success to that? And if someone doesn't have those political securities, might not be able to drive reform?
So a person without that political network will not get to that position in the first instance. So, but for me, and I will say this is now where people that have this type of experience like me comes in. When I was in the Federal Road Safety, there were young officers I gave opportunity. Somebody like Abdullahi Sani, who was my media assistant. He wrote me a letter from his command in Kaduna detailing what he thought was wrong with the corps and how he think it should be fixed. I sent for him, he panicked. When he came to Abuja, I finished talking to him. I called the person in charge of posting. I said, post Sani to Abuja. He's going to work in my office now. Now you have a job. That thing you told me that need to be corrected. Now you have a
do
job. Do it. The second boy was somebody called Emmanuel John, an ARC. ARC is the youngest of the officers. He's the assistant route commander. He wrote me a memo on the bicycle project. He said he saw I have a passion, and I worked with Chief Ojo Madekwe. He has a passion for non-motorized transport, and he thinks that road safety was not paying attention. So I sent for him. He came, I said, we're setting up a desk now on non-motorized transport. So you're going to be the secretary, and the deputy corps marshal will be the chairman. So you go out and figure out our non-motorized transport policy. Look at some of the work I have done in that area as a guide and go ahead and do it. Just as we set it up, I got a letter inviting me to a cycling conference in Australia. And the conference coincided with the time of the strikes related to the fuel price increase of 2012. So I couldn't travel. Then I said to John, you will go to that conference. I'm supposed to make a presentation. You will make that presentation on my behalf. Tell them that, give this presentation on my behalf. And everybody in the call was like, an ARC, a young officer who is barely 2 years in the corps. And till today, he still heads the non-motorized transport division of the FRSC. He's done very well in the global network of the bicycle campaign. He's very well known across Africa today and the world. And he's also the secretary of the Transport Growth Initiative, a non-governmental organization I formed to harness the transport sector. So leaders have the responsibility to bring these young people and provide them with cover. That was the genius of Obasanjo. He provided you opportunity and provided you with the political cover. So that way, you were not afraid of doing your work. I mean, Nuhu Ribadu was an assistant commissioner of police when he went to EFCC, and he had a larger-than-life image under Obasanjo. So it is the job of us, all of us, leaders, in our private company, in our public institutions, to groom young people and give them opportunities. That will definitely, so it's not a mark of just me having that connection, but just the fact that, and that's where I give Ojo Madekwe the genius of the work he did with me as his assistant, was that anytime we had visitors in his house, we finished dinner, he will ask me to give the vote of thanks. And when he's invited to some conference and he couldn't go, he will ask me to represent him. So I found myself at a conference of very senior citizens, and I said, well, if Ojo Madekwe was here today, this is what he would have said. And I went ahead to give what I thought was a presentation on his behalf. When he heard it, he had a good laugh that, you know, everybody said, he kept saying, if Ojo Madekwe was here, this is what he would have said. And so that for me is the idea of leadership. We should be able to bring young people up and provide them the political cover to make their mistakes. And I made so many mistakes. I ran into so many troubles. But if I were to be doing it again today, I'll be more careful, meaning that I will not be as radical as I wanted to be. So that is saying that I didn't have the political experience up to this point. So I'm one of those who canvass very strongly that in every organization, in every institution, we should have a policy of, you know, once in a while, rejigging the organization, bringing in an outsider, finding young people to come and, you know, just shake it up as we develop what I call the careerist, those who just from one for the other until they get to the top.
Okay, so let's get into the performance management system you created at FRSC, because I think that there's a lot that we can all learn from it. When we were engaged to, you know, chronicle some of these initiatives, one of the things that really got me to a wow stage was when we interviewed some of the people in your office, and they complained that they were yet to win the award for being top performers, and that other departments in FRSC had won this award, and some had been sent to Harvard Business School, London Business School, and so on. So two things struck out at me. Number one is that being in the office of the Corps Marshal did not give you any added advantage, but also everybody in the organization seemed to be vying for the perks that came from being top performers. So can you define for us what this performance management system was, I hope still is, and how it was created and how we found the top performers and rewarded them?
So first of all, let me start by saying that the Corps Marshal's office was deliberately and carefully set up to reflect our national desire for integration. So my ADC was Igbo, my PA was Hausa from Katsina, my SA was Yoruba lady. There was, I had equal opportunities for both male and female. My PSO was Steve from Benue. My second PSO too was Yoruba. So if you look at the Corps Marshal's office, I had the opportunity of having the kaleidoscopic view of the organization. People that came from within, people that came from outside. And when we sat on the table, I could feel a sense of our own national aspiration. Because when I said the commands in Benue, my PSO would tell me that, he just went home. There was no patrol team on Boko, so and so road. My SA would say she was in Ogun last week and nothing was happening in Ogun. So just sitting down on that table every morning, mixing with those staff, made that I got what I call a sense of how the country is operating. My PA will go to Katsina, come back and tell me the command in Katsina is not working, or the command is doing very well in Sokoto. So that in itself was the first principle I set up. The second principle was that we have to be driven by performance. Results was it. But my PSO is from Benue, very good officer, very good staff officer, but somehow was very slow in adapting technology. So his first promotion exam, he didn't pass, he failed. As the results came out, the whole corps was shocked that the PSO to the corps marshal was not promoted. He eventually retired as a deputy corps marshal. He was a corps commander then. He eventually got promoted after 2 attempts. Because I told him, you ain't going to be promoted until you get used to the computer. Because I knew if it was a written exam, he would definitely come among the top tier. But just sitting down and typing it was a problem. So he too hired a staff to come and start coaching him on using the computer. But this is to show you how I felt about the sanctity of performance. Now, so the Corps Marshal's office was said that the average of the performance of the Corps is our own score. So if the Corps scores, if the average score is below 50, that means that we as Corps Marshal's office, me in particular, have scored below 50. So the performance management was set up in such a way that we went through all the metrics of the performance, and every quarter a result was brought out. The first quarter we did it, the average score was about 41%. And that became my own score. By the time we finished the year 2011, if I was correct, our average score was somewhere around 48%. So our rule was that any department that scored below 50%, the head of that department would talk with a consultant, a HR consultant we hired. That meant that I myself needed to talk to a consultant because my own score now was below 50 as the Corps Marshal. And two things happened. I got invaluable feedback. When they spoke to my direct reports, they all complained that I never stayed on a project long enough. Once I start one and it is moving, the following week I will come up with another one and say, this is now the most important. Then by the time they're getting used to that most important, I will come with a new one and say, look, leave everything now. We must get this done. So there was always conflicting signals from me. Secondly, they said, I never had patience to go through people's problems. And once they come to complain to me, I'm always like dismissive of the complaints and just said, we just want results. So that most times I never got to put resources to projects as I had given them out. So those were fantastic feedback. So the consultant said, I need to nominate 2 mentors to speak to who will coach me on how to manage people. So I nominated Fola Adiola and Udo Minoyo of ExxonMobil, who used to be my boss. So I spent time with them, discussed my frustrations, my issues, and 2 things came out. Prioritize your projects, stay on them long enough, and make out time to listen to your direct reports. Create time to speak to them and make sure that you listen during the conversation. So that created my first 180 feedback from my staff, and I found it invaluable. So going forward, our average score year on year kept going up. Sometimes he averaged about 60. The current Corps Marshal came first twice, and he came first in those departments. And the first time he came first, he went to the course at Harvard. I nominated a regulatory course at Harvard. So the first commander from the zones and the first from the departments, the 2 of them will head off to Harvard. After that, we then said, okay, since he had done Harvard before and he won it again, we'll give him a holiday with his wife in any place of their choice. And he did that. So the officers saw that I took the issue of performance seriously. I myself couldn't then go to the Harvard program, nor could I go. My officers were upset in the Corps Marshal's office that we should be evaluated on our own and graded and not be given the result of everybody. I said, that is the burden of leadership. The Corps cannot be underperforming and I'll be overperforming. Yeah. So it is important that I reflect the status of the Corps at every point in time. With benefit of hindsight, maybe I should have removed the Corps Marshal's office as a unit and allow the PSO and the SA, who were the head, to benefit from their own performance, because we were always ahead of our curve in our own assignments. But I thought that that was a way to making it clear to the core that performance management is serious business and that we're taking it very serious. So we had a very strong team that verified the projects each department, each zone did, and ensured that the scores, and nobody ever quarreled about the integrity of the measurement process. In one of the occasions, I said to them, we wanted to nominate officers to go to California, to go for the California Highway Patrol, a World Bank sponsored project. Of course, people were already nominating their brothers and their friends. And I came back one day and said, listen, this is the nomination criteria. The officers with the highest bookings that are of quality bookings, not booking light sign violation and all those small offenses. The officers with this type of bookings, I listed them. And guess what? They came from Sokoto. They came from Maiduguri Command. They came from Bayelsa. And when they gathered in Abuja, of the 40 that went, about 38 of them had never had a passport before. In fact, one of them said when he was invited to Abuja, he thought his job was over. What did he do to merit being called to Abuja? He had never come to the headquarters. And those officers when I went to see them in California, it was very emotional. This was their first time abroad. They were in California. They were wearing the chief's jacket, driving in their car, going on patrols with them in California. They were very, very, very motivated and happy. And I was very proud of the fact that we have opportunity for everybody in the Corps. We are building an organization where no man is oppressed. All that you needed to go forward was the work you did and not who you are, where you come from, or what you are doing. And that also, on a final point on that performance management, it created a very competitive environment in the Corps and an environment where people became innovative. So my secretary, my personal assistant secretary then, came up with this idea that every time people sent mails to us, they came calling to find out what has happened, where was it minuted to. So she developed a template. Once a letter came to our office and I treated it, the phone number on the letterhead gets a text message informing the person, your letter to the Corps Marshal has been treated and minuted to department of such and such. I didn't know about it until people started calling me to say, we got a message from your office. Our file has gone here. Yeah. And I called her, she said, well, she thought that this was something that would help us since we like using technology. We needed to show people that we're ahead of the curve. And that singular process she brought out won an award for us in FRSC by one NGO. They said that was the most innovative government institution they had seen. Not only just responding, but following up with you to tell you what has happened to your message or your letter or your file. And that led us to now automating our file system in FRSC. So when they gave us the award and there was a prize with it, I said they should present the prize to her. I took her to the venue of the award and said she should collect it because this was the work, this was her innovation. And all over the Corps, people were coming out with various innovative programs. Because that meant that a young girl like Officer Amma, who won the best officer in, patrol team leader, ended up going to Ethiopia with me to Addis Ababa for a conference. So we did these drivers. We call it it's called the computer driving license. It's a computer certification program. I went to a tour in Kenya, and in their newspaper, I saw an advert reminding people that all government agents are supposed to be CDL certified. So initially I thought it was driving license, but when I now read it, I found that it was a computer certification program. So I cut that part of the advert, came back to Nigeria, made contact with them, and said all FRSC staff must go through that computer driving license program. So this Officer Amma came first in the exam. In fact, the office of the company in South Africa said she's one of the top scorers of that exam in Africa. So when I got her result, I just told them, I said I was going to Addis Ababa for a meeting. I said they should put her on the team to go with me. She still remains a very strong officer in Federal Road Safety, very enterprising. And I'm very proud of young people like that.
Excellent, excellent. We'll open it up for questions. If you have questions, just indicate by raising up your hand, and we'll grant you access to ask your question really short, and let's see how many of those questions we can get to. But before we get to that, how did you deal with, some sense of fairness, right? And the question I'm trying to ask here is, if you keep the performance management at just what the numbers say, you might find that a particular group of people, either young people, do better than older people, or that maybe a particular part of the country might appear to be, more favored by that process. How do you ensure that everybody in the course still feels a sense of equity, that the performance management is not used or seen to be used to penalize, some people?
So this is a very important point, and it's important because I'm one of those who believe very firmly that the idea of federal character was not a bad idea. It's actually a very good idea in a country that is first trying to build a nation out of disparate ethnic groups. There is a need for some type of affirmative action. But I also believe that that affirmative action should continuously be fine-tuned to make sure that we do not sacrifice merit on the altar of affirmative action.
Correct.
So in FRSC, it is known, the rules are clear, that if we are doing recruitment, we allot the same number for all the states of the Federation. So that first rule is that we allot the same number. But I said that would be unfair because there are some states already that have an unfair advantage in FRSC. So what we did is that, let's say we want to get 360 people. That will have meant 10 per state, 10 per state. So, but we said, no, we'll make it 50%, 5 per state. Then we will now invert the table from the state with the highest number of officers to the state with the least number of officers. We work the percentages. And then so Kogi State, which has the highest number of officers, will probably get 1 additional to make their own 6. Yobe State and Bayelsa State, which has the lowest amount of officers, will probably get 14 to start making up for the disparity that they have in the corps. My officers thought that was ingenious. When I came up with that idea, I said, no, you can't just say 10-10. You will be perpetuating the advantage of those who have advantage. So we need to invert it in such a way that at the end of about 10-15 years, we'll have something to a close similarity. The highest state and the lowest state, the difference will not be much. So that idea of fairness is something we instituted in the process to say, for promotion, for certain ranks from corps commander up, we have about 50 corps commanders. So every state must have at least 1. Then the remaining 14 is given out on merit to those who came first, those who did that in the exam. ACMs will have about 20 something. So we said every zone must have at least 3. So, and for the DCM, it was 6. We said every zone must have 1. So what happens is that in the course of the competition, you compete, the zone with the person that is number 1 in that zone gets that. But that number 1 means that you must cross the minimum exam mark. Our minimum score of either 50 or 60, depending on the level of exam. If you score less than 50, then we will not promote anybody from that zone. We will open up the exam for another round of exams, now including younger officers to join. So that way, we didn't sacrifice our minimum standard. What is the problem in Nigeria today is that we have sacrificed minimum standard. So you write a federal government college exam, and they said all you need to do from a certain state is to just score 10, and you will get admitted. No, if the national minimum score is 50%, you must score 50% to be able to get into that exam, period. Correct. Because there is nothing, and I thought it was an unfair system when you did this affirmative action without paying emphasis on merit. So in FRSC, we had a situation once where the highest scoring officers, the person that came first overall, came from the Northwest. It wasn't from the Southeast or the South-South. I've seen officers from the South, from the Northwest. I know one officer who is there now as assistant commercial. He got promoted almost twice in 2 years because he was doing excellently well in the exams. So everybody in road safety knew there was fairness, knew that I had no effort to give an advantage to one person or the other. In fact, all the rules in FRSC that was against women, that I thought was some misogyny on them, that a woman needed to get a letter of approval from me before she could get married, maternity leave.
That was a thing?
Yeah, yes. For them to get married, the ladies, they need to write to me and get an approval, telling me the name of the man they were getting married to. So that's
fantastic.
A rule that ensured that women officers did not get messed up with criminals who go to marry female police officers, you know, and all of that. But I said there are also female criminals. So the men and the women to write me for approval before they get married. So we changed the rule from just female writing to every officer who is getting married must write. So we went to our rule books. Then the maternity leave, we also created paternity leave. If your wife gave birth, we are entitled to some weeks of leave to go and help your wife and, you know, get familiar with your little baby. So initially people had a good laugh at it, but I said, fairness means fairness. It doesn't mean to one group. It means that our institution of fairness must be blindfolded. You know, our institution of fairness must have the blindfold. And
like Lady Justice.
Justice. It must
so
be,
I think this is a good point to probably pull in you know, some of the people with their hands up. If we can grant access to Pius, Emeka, and Sotonye, Nasiru, Anthony, and Pius, unmute yourself and ask a question.
Well, gentlemen, good afternoon. This is Pius Kibo Jr. So I've been listening to you, and it's been very, very interesting. I have a comment. I also have a question that will follow the comment. I hope you don't mind.
Yes.
I've spent quite a number of years doing a lot of just say IT consulting in the public sector, and at no time did I ever hear about what was going on in FRSC. So I was quite surprised when you started talking about how you went to NITDA to go get the enterprise license, the Microsoft enterprise license. I was also quite surprised when you talked about how you went to Galaxy Backbone to go get the VSAT connections to set up your email system. And I'm quite impressed with all the things you've been talking about and how you brought technology in. Was there any time you had an opportunity to go talk about how you were embracing technology to improve the quality of service within the core, I think you called it the core, correct?
The core,
yeah.
Yes. The only reason why I'm emphasizing on this is I had which Christmas was this? I think the Christmas of 2015. I was driving home from Lagos to the village by road, and I left the day before Christmas. A few miles to Ore, I was stopped and asked to present my license. I presented my license, and the young officer just looked at me and said, "Sir, your license is fake. That you must have given your driver your passport and whatever it is to go and get your license." And I said, "Yes." He says, "Sir, I can take you to Ore now and have your car impounded, and they will tell you all the things you need to know to go get your correct license. But I'm looking at you, you look like a gentleman." Obviously, he had looked at all my gray hair and figured he needed to have mercy on my soul. So he says to me, "Look, I can let you go, but I'm afraid that if you go down the road, if further down the road, you may run into another group of FRSC officers and they may impound you. They may impound your car." But he says to me, "Look, if you make me a promise that you're going to now correct this license, I will prove to you that we are human beings and that we have souls." Man, I was so impressed with what this guy told me. And then he now did something else. He says, "To prove to you that your license is fake, I'm going to stop 2 cars and show you their licenses." Luckily for those drivers that he stopped, the 2 of them produced their licenses He came and showed it to me, and my goodness gracious, 5 minutes after I left this gentleman, I called my driver and I told him that by the time I get back to Lagos, he should pack his bags and move out of my house. So that was one thing that impressed me too. They also went on to, they used an iPad. They had an iPad present to prove to me that that license number was not in the FRSC
in the database.
database.
Yeah.
So those two things so impressed me. Now, so back to my comment, or my, well, kind of pseudo comment and a question. At no time was I aware, as somebody who had worked seriously within the public sector in software, technology, done so much consulting work, I never heard about all these things you guys were doing in FRSC. So did you have a newsletter? Was there any kind of, did you ever have some kind of forum locally where you could have been talking about these things? Because if I hadn't listened to you now, I wouldn't have believed that any of these things were being done in FRSC. I'm sorry to be talking too much.
Thank you, Pius. We'll take all the questions and then you have a chance to respond to them. Let's move to the next.
I want to appeal to Patrick that the interest I'm getting from the questions, both online and offline, you may have to extend beyond 1 hour.
Okay, we will look at that. Okay, so Emeka, can we grant access to all of them so they can just ask their questions? Yusuf, Emeka, please.
Oh, okay. My name is Emeka, and it's such a pleasure watching the former Corps Marshal. I'm a retired Major General in the Nigerian Army, and I have my own experience. I have my own experience with Corps Marshal Chidoka. But before I share my own experience, let me just comment on what he said about getting permission before a personnel is married. I think that would have been borrowed from the military. It is a practice in the military that before any officer gets married, that officer writes an application to the commanding officer or to the commander. The essence of that is for the commanding officer or the commander to counsel that officer. Usually the officer would write the name of the person he or she intends getting married to, gives a bit of background information on that person, and the officer is counseled. Some kind of background check is done on that person, and that officer is counseled on why he or she should not marry that person. It wasn't, well, in the military, it's not targeted just at female officers, it's both for male and female, and I'm happy that Corps Marshal Chidoka extended it to the male personnel. Going back to my own personal experience with the Corps Marshal, while I was a cadet in the Nigerian Defense Academy training, we had a subject called driving and maintenance. Cadets who were undergoing training were made to learn how to drive. Back in the days, in the 70s, 78, 79, we used to learn how to drive using the Land Rover and did basic maintenance. By the time I became commandant of the Nigerian Defense Academy in 2010, 2011, things had gotten so bad that a subject like driving and maintenance was no longer being taught in the academy. And because I wanted to bring back some of those things that I experienced as a cadet about 32 years before getting to command the institution, I wrote to the Road Safety Corps, and incidentally, Corps Marshal Chidoka was the Corps Marshal. I visited him with a number of my staff officers and saw the very impressive outlay they had. It was really, really impressive. Just like the previous commentator, Pius Okibo Jr. mentioned, not being part of that organization, one didn't know all that they were achieving. It was really a very good experience. So I requested the Corps Marshal to attach some Corps road safety personnel officers to the Defense Academy to revitalize training and maintenance for cadets. Fortunately, the government gave us about 30 hillocks, And of course, Commercial Chidoka approved our request there and then. We had about 40 commercial personnel who were attached to the Defense Academy. Although they were wearing their road safety uniform, they were wearing the NDA plume, the NDA belt, and the NDA insignia, which was very, very nice. And they started teaching cadets how to drive and how to maintain vehicles. They were staff, they were integral to the Nigerian Defense Academy. And what that meant was that as a cadet was graduating with his bachelor's degree, with his military training, he also was passing out with his driving license.
Sure.
An officer could learn how to drive and maintain vehicles. And that was my personal experience.
Thank you.
All those officers who benefited from that up till now send me messages to tell me that if not for the opportunity the road safety gave them, they probably wouldn't have learned how to drive.
Thank you very much, General. Thank you. Nasiru, you need to unmute, please. If Nasir,
good afternoon, okay. Patrick. Good afternoon, sir. Mine is more of a request. One of the major public policy challenges in Nigeria and most developing countries are sort of the institutional overlaps of mandates between interagencies, and in the case of Nigeria, between federal and state. I know that has been an issue with FRSC and VIO, obviously with states and with state governments, especially as it relates to revenue generation and the licensing of motor vehicles. So my request is, does the commercial mind throwing a little bit more light on those challenges and how he was able to address some of those challenges? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sotonye.
Good evening, gentlemen. Please confirm that you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for a detailed overview on your time in public service. Indeed, I echo the comments of some of the gentlemen who have spoken. I know for a certainty that the FRSC collaborated with some of the IOCs and indeed brought reduced incidents, to areas where those companies sort of had some of their facilities and even in the areas they operated. So well done on your stellar performance. Again, my name is Sotonye Apiafe-Dohore. I'm an operational excellence consultant. So when I hear you speak to performance management, you sort of bothered only on, performance appraisals with respect to the staff of FRSC. And then when I hear you cite examples, they were mainly opportunistic examples. So things that came up and people sort of stepped up, to resolve. However, I want to hear from you, what were the strategic priorities during your time and how did they tie to your year-on-year goals for the FRSC? How then did they translate to tasks and targets for your team? And how did that play up in their performance appraisal? The second thing I want to understand is, why is the public service sector here only exams? So it's when I hear people say the right. So how is the performance on? Do they have what are the performance of and how they tie to your overall strategic priorities? And how has the performance been the FRS on year? And is the allowed to interrogate your performance? Is it visually displayed on maybe your website? How do people get to give you that objective feedback? So yes, I hear a lot around performance on your colleagues, your younger colleagues, stepping up and resolving issues. But then I wanted to tie it to your strategic priority, what FRSC was set up to deliver, how they delivered, and how that brought value to Nigerians.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Chukwuka, you need to unmute.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Please confirm you can hear me. Okay,
we can hear you.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. And thank you, Chief Chidoka, for this insightful exposition. I was wrapped with attention. So quick one is, my concern or my interest more is on the third the third initiative, because you started by saying know the organization, so you taught the commands. So let us have a vision. So there was a vision process.
That's
you knew that was number 2. The number 3 was engage, staff engagement. So that led to the bottom-top performance management system that was linked strongly to the command assessment. So yes, so from working in the private sector, from where I work from today, and I know what performance management system is, and most of the performance management platforms are bought off the shelf. When you talk about the Kaplan, the Kaplan Balance Scorecard performance system and all that. So it's of interest to know that a public sector driven organization developed an in-house performance management system that was fair, and equitable to everyone. So not everyone will perform, right? So what did you do with the laggards? And in the performance management system too, there's counseling, people have to go and talk to consultants and all that. When it's obvious that you cannot redeem, is it redeemable? Is staff. What did you do? Did you sack? Because considering the fact that the commission, Federal Road Safety Commission, is a government agency and a career job that people get into and have that hope that they will retire with gratuity and pension. So did you ever get to sack people?
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's take the last one, Dr. Anthony, and then Chidoka will have an opportunity to respond.
Okay.
Dr. Anthony.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you. Oh, it's yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Here's my excellent. Yeah, I would want to commend Chief Chidoka for the presentation. As a matter of fact, my opinion has been that the FR under him was that can perform. And we can see that it was a system that was like self-running and auto-running system because of the processes and procedures that have been set up and of course automated. I was also a chief executive of NIMET from 2007 to 2017. Of course, when Chief Chidoka came to Ministry of Aviation, which supervised the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, I worked under him. And I had cause to invite him at that time to see the level of automation.
Okay, let me just invite Chief Chidoka to respond to some of the comments and questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I will start from the comment of Pius Okibo Jr. And it's one of the things I find interesting in Nigeria is I keep telling my team that I considered myself a failure in public communication. And they always said, but you were always in the news. We're always making the news. I said, yes, but there are a few campaigns I remember very well. If you ask anybody who was old enough in 1993, they will remember MKO, Izawa Mano.
Mano.
Everybody remembers that. everybody remembers me, I love my country, I like the land and people. How come I haven't gotten something that will get the public to remember? Either
or Bako Super Sack.
Or Bako Super Sack, yes, Bako. So, Zebrodaya. And the reason why I say this is that in 2007, the first 2 national adverts I ran was a request for IT consultants to review the driver's license system, to review the motor vehicle administration system, and advise us on upgrade and technology. They ran 2 separate adverts. At the end of the day, PwC Consulting won for the driver's license, and Nexon won the bid for the vehicle administration, which led to what we now talked about, the new driver's license and all of that. But we didn't even stop at that. After PwC did the consulting work and came up with what they thought should be the improvement to the driver's license, we still went ahead and invited bids from across the world of people who were doing driver license systems. L1 of the US won that bid. L1 later was bought over by Safran Mofo. So we built a $10 million data center for the new driver's license. That was why the officers could on the road pull their data from that driver's license. The driver's license network is an unbelievable amount of capacity that we built in Jabi in Abuja, is lying there in Abuja today. So I'm always surprised when IT companies said so. We also did an advert asking for IT consultants to help us automate our HR, our finance, and we eventually settled for SAP. So in fact, it's interesting. I was in an SAP conference in South Africa where the SAP had invited me to talk about how a public institution was using their business intelligence software. Because the Nigerian army had bought the business intelligence software from the SAP, but they were having challenges. And then FRSC got it, and we had deployed it and was using it to very good effect. So the city of Cape Town in South Africa was looking to invest in a business intelligence software from SAP. So SAP invited me to be the lead speaker to talk about what we have used it for in FRSC. It was the SAP business intelligence that told us that the worst road in Nigeria that by terms of accident was not Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, was not Benin-Onitsha Expressway, that it was actually Abuja, Kubwa, Zuba, Kaduna Express Road was our worst road in Nigeria. That was where the most people died. It was from our SAP that we understood that Mondays were bloodbaths on Nigerian road. Tuesdays, for reasons we could not understand, was the best day to travel in Nigeria. Fridays and Sundays were terrible days to be on Nigerian roads between the hours of 2 and the hours of 4. So I'm saying this because all these adverts were public adverts. FRSC was always, we had a very transparent procurement process, so we were always advertising. And all our technology partners, everybody, we made a lot of noise about it. But you're right, so many people still didn't know that by the time I left, we had done so many local projects, including that iPad you saw with the officers, was because the Canadian police had given us the software they were using for booking traffic offenders. But the company that had it said it would cost us $5 million to implement it in Nigeria. And when I looked at $5 million, I said, that won't work for a third world country. I came back here, and for about 25 million naira, we built a system. It was crude. It was not like, it didn't have the bells and whistles of the Canadian police, but it worked. They were using the iPad, and they were using those handheld devices. And we got the fresh data we wanted from the road. But that is to say, we embraced technology. Our HR was SAP driven. Our finance was SAP. Our business intelligence was SAP. Our Outlook, Enterprise Outlook was done from NIDA. We also had Oracle on our driver's license, where we got the discount from Oracle based on the Nigeria's global licensing. So we had a lot of technology working with us in FRSC, and most of those companies appreciated it. The program with NDA that General Onwamebu talked about was one of my proudest partnerships, because I created an office deliberately for partnerships. I said we wanted to bring our project into people's lives. So we partnered. When the NDA approached us, we were very happy because it gave us an opportunity. By the way, I must give credit to the Nigerian Army for most of my successes in FRSC. When I was appointed Corps Marshal, before I agreed to wear the uniform, the first thing I did was I said to the officers, I must be trained. I can't go and enter a uniform that I hadn't been trained to wear. So they said, who will train you? I said, not FRSC, it will be the Nigerian military. So at the gas brigade in Abuja, Major General Role was the commanding officer then in Abuja, not at the gas brigade, the one at the Abacha barracks. And he arranged a 4-week training program. So every morning I stood in the sun with these sergeants drilling me from saluting to going physical drills to the classroom, learning about ranks, to the issues of officers came and took me about planning, how the military planned, about promotion in the military. After 4 weeks, they actually took me on a parade in front of the senior officers before they said, yes, well done. And that was how I turned up the following week in my uniform in FRSC, because I just felt it would have been totally ignorant and stupid of me to wear a uniform and be walking around without knowing the rules behind the paramilitary organization. So, but while I was in that program with the Army, I saw that the Army had rules for everything. They had documentation for everything. The Nigerian Army is an amazing organization. So most of the things I did in FRSC, we were always sending for from Defense Academy, from JAGI, from TRADOC. They were coming to join us in planning to help us streamline our processes, including our uniform. That's how we now have number 1, number 2, number 3 uniforms, just like the military. I adopted a lot from the Nigerian Army. So that program was very, very useful and helpful, and it helped us to now bring up other partnerships we had with other organizations. Now, the Nasiru talked about the challenges of overlap. There will always be that challenges in a federal system. But the problem of the Nigerian Federation, like I always say, is that we are the only federal government in the world where the states did not create the federation. It was the federation that created the states. So we're a very strange federal government. Normally, states come together and form a federation. But in our case, we were creating the states. So most of the states have no capacity for the work that they ought to have done. The federal government became the more capable organization than the states. Meanwhile, as you can see with American election, there's no federal electoral body. Every state was conducting the elections and was announcing the results. In Nigeria, we needed to have an INEC who conducted the elections even for local governments in some states. So the issue of overlap has been there, and I managed it very well by trying to move FRSC to become more of a regulator, a big brother to the states, create a platform for us and the VIOs. What was the problem was that the governors were not willing to invest to adopt our level of automation to the VIOs so that we can have a seamless communication on managing traffic in Nigeria. And I think that that's a job that still needs to be done. The federal government must have a way to integrate the states. Our security architecture in Nigeria must change to embrace new and emerging trends. FRSC has come, civil defense has come, private security companies have come. We need to integrate all of that with the state apparatus, including the so-called state security services that are coming. The federal government must set standards for people to come into the same platform, report crimes the same way, and able to report people who have committed different crimes in the same way so that we can have a national overview of the crime situation in Nigeria. So Tonya spoke about the performance appraisal. So I guess because of my conversation, it came across as if I was talking mainly of the internal processes. Yeah, right, that came across. But the way we set it up, we had what we call the internal goals and the external goals. If you go to the FRSC website, and I don't know what /what now, but if you click on the performance management, you will see year by year. At the beginning of the year, we come out to the goals. So our external goals at that time was to reduce road traffic fatalities by 30%, road crashes by 30%, and fatalities by 20%. Improve rescue services and reduce response times to 15 minutes. Improve traffic management by reducing traffic infractions by 50% and increasing traffic control by 20%. And we said improve service delivery, improve data collection, and also improve use of technology and improve public image of the Corps. Then we had internal goals of improving internal communication, improving staff welfare, improving staff performance, empowering field commands to increase focus on patrols, and enhance legal framework of the FRSC. So these our goals are set up at the beginning of the year, and then every department will now begin to align themselves to how to achieve these our external and internal goals. And it is in the course of doing that that you itemize the programs you will do. So if you go to that website, you will see in 2012, department by department, all that they said they will do. You will see green for done, yellow for ongoing, and red for not done. We had a template that everything that you did will come out in that green, yellow, and red. So at the end of the year, you will see a band that says number of management decisions, number done, number ongoing, number not done. Every department, number of initiatives they came up with, number that was achieved, and then of course the overall goal. How many, what percentage did we reduce fatalities? By what percentage did we reduce road crashes? So all those were factored in. It was a all-encompassing performance management. So the public saw it. I did an annual performance review. I announced it. The NGOs in the industry will normally come back to us. Some will question our data. Some will fault our analysis. And at the end of the day, we come up with a synchronized system. So yes, there was that effort to institutionalize that performance management. I just spoke about the staff because in Nigeria, the weakest link in achieving goals in public sector is the staff. And that's why we do exams, because we haven't gotten that high quality recruitment process that brings the kind of people that are in the private sector. You are dealing with people here who you used to have to almost handhold. And that leads me to the last issue pointed out about what do you do with the laggards. So we had a department we call special duties. All those people that consistently went below par, we send them to Department of Special Duties. So we advise them that you can eat banana here, eat granite, until you repent, then we'll bring you back to operational departments. But while you are in that special duties department, we created the responsibilities for them, for engagement with our stakeholders, for engagement with our programs like Road Transport Safety Standardization Scheme, for going to do measurement. It was like grind work. And then after a year or two, we bring you back to see whether you have made any improvement. Some people, we said they could never be commanding officers because of their performance. We will never accommodate you to be a commanding officer. So one of the things that propelled us to most of these things we were doing was our relationship with the World Bank. Every January we met with the World Bank, we share our targets with them, and then they give us feedback on the things they can do to help us. So one of the things they did to help us was what we call the country capacity review. That capacity review made sure that they reviewed our systems and processes and advised us on what can be done. That led to the World Bank intervening with a $10 million project on what we call the Safe Corridor project. We got $10 million from the World Bank to do this Safe Corridor project, and it was a very successful project. In fact, by the time I left, the World Bank had agreed a $50 million project to improve road safety in Nigeria and to bring road safety as a key component of all their road contracts in Nigeria. So there was a strong emphasis on achieving our corporate goals and making sure that we get it done. And because of that system-driven approach, that was what led us to go into ISO 9001 certification, to ensure that our systems and processes are audited by third parties. So every year, the ISO, when we started, the first time we did the ISO audit, we got almost 3,000 exceptions. It was a mess, and I persevered. By the time we did the third one, we were down to less than 100 exceptions before we eventually got the ISO certification. And that meant that every 2 years, every 3 years, they came back and audited the system to ensure that that system was still working as planned. And last year, the FRSC got back its ISO certification. They went through the audit and passed. So it became a marker for my successors to always ensure that they kept in line with the ISO certification, because we now made the ISO system as part of the FRSC condition of service. We attached it to our manual, our handbook. So it is important that in sustaining reforms, most of the reformers, I learned this mistake from Ojo Madekwe in transport, from Nasir El-Rufai in FCT. Once they left, the systems unraveled because we forgot that the civil service is guided by the civil service rules. So it is those rules that needs to be amended to reflect these new initiatives. That is the only way those systems can remain enduring and auditable. In my own case, I attached the ISO 9001 to it. So that made sure that the quality management system made sure that we can't go against our rules. And the final example I will give about not going against our own rules is when we were launching the driver's license. And I said, President Jonathan should come and launch it. And his staff said, well, if I want him to launch it, he will launch it in the villa. I said, well, that's possible, but that means that he will not get the new driver's license. They were they were shocked. Because they said that the president never goes out of the villa to perform any of those functions. The passport office will come to his office. How do I mean that he has to come to my office? How dare you? Well, I stood my ground. I said he could delegate the vice president or the minister to come for the launch, but that there is no way for us to bring the driver's license to the villa. That it is on a VPN, and that VPN recognizes only our offices. So the only way he can get the new driver's license is if he came to my office. That was scandalous to the president handlers. So they insisted, I said, well, no problem. He doesn't need to come. If he doesn't come, he can delegate somebody. But two things happened. The United Nations building was bombed the week before that, some weeks before that. And the president, some of the information they wanted on vehicle number plates came to me. So when I went to see the president, I told him, well, we're launching a new driver's license, which is biometrics led, and we wanted you to come, but they said you couldn't come. He said, why shouldn't he come? I said, they say you don't leave the villa to do anything, that government offices come to you. He said, that's not true. They come because that's how they come. They've never asked me to come before. So I said, well, we're inviting you to our office to come for your driver's license. And he accepted. So President Jonathan turned up in September in our office. He did his driver's license. We got the VIO to come and sign his report. We paid for the driver's license, 6,500. I made a point to collect the money from him. He gave me 10,000 naira for the driver's license, even though I had paid before he came. But he gave me the 10,000 naira for that driver's license. I told him it was 6,500, but he gave me 10,000 naira. So I made the VIO to sign the paper, and he went and did the capture, and he got the license. And that was my biggest political score, because it meant that no other person in Nigeria could tell me that I should come for him for a driver's license. Since I got the president to do it, it was one of my finest moments. And it was one time I thought that President Jonathan got his head screwed on right by agreeing to do that. I mean, he doesn't drive, he didn't need to get the license, but by doing that, he gave us the political cover and the political capital to be able to insist that all Nigerians must come to the office for their driver's license, including yours truly. Anytime mine expires now, I go to the FRSC to renew my license.
Me too. There are a few other questions we got in the chat room. Let me see if you can respond to them as well. You've already spoken to sustainability of the initiatives, which was a question Chukwemeka Okonkwo raised, but I'll also want you to spend a bit more time to talk about how some of these reforms can be sustained, going forward, and what lessons can other organizations learn in trying to do that. There's a question from an anonymous. He says, what can you say about the road safety officers who currently extort from motorists, on the road? If all of this stuff you're saying here is all correct, how come we've got these officers who extort from motorists? There's a question on how can you share these ideas with other organizations in the public service to help them in implementing same, and also not just at the federal, but also at the state. There's another question from Dozier Opalo-Bieri on how to groom staff, public sector staff, for their post-service life. Is there any plan for that? If not, what can be done? I know there are a lot of them,
So I will take the last question first. Since I left FRSC had become a hiring ground for transport companies. As of today, a deputy corps marshal, 2 assistant corps marshals are working with Dangote Transport. Because we started something called the Road Transport Safety Standardization Program.
Yes.
And we started also the Driving School Standardization Program. And I had the FRSC staff in mind when I created these programs. The idea is that they will be able to transition from the core into private sector jobs as transport advisors to companies, RUTSS officers to companies, open driving schools. I myself had opened a driving school. In fact, I will be launching a national program on it now on changing driving culture. The idea is that the life after the core should be able to continue in a more structured manner. And I'm happy that many of them are taking up that opportunity. Some have even migrated into other government agencies. I have 2 officers who have moved to the CBN, where they're in charge of their fleet. I have officers who have moved to some other agencies like the Petroleum Equalization Fund, where the FRSC interface with them is ensuring that people cannot use the same number plate multiple times to claim equalization fund. We actually saved the country close to 14 billion naira from the equalization scam. The organization itself made a public statement that just by integrating with the FRSC database and ensuring that all the tankers that operate with them have the new number plate, they have saved the organization 14 billion naira in 1 year from fake, because people used to just use the same number plates. They will keep round tripping that the truck has done many journeys when the truck has actually done only one journey. And many people do not know that the issue of the importation of fuel, when there was this scandal about fuel subsidy, about people claiming bringing in more ships and not being able to claim more money from the fuel subsidy. One of the ways that the Agi Mokwede committee sorted out the problem was by getting the data of vehicles registered in FRSC. And that proved that there was no way those fuel could have been brought into Nigeria if these vehicles were not available to transport them. So there are so many linkages we've done with FRSC that the officers are now very highly sought after in different organizations. So that said, the issue of the officers that are corrupt on the road is reflective of the country. So we are not going to have angels in FRSC. They will always reflect the environment. While I was commercial, I sacked over 2,000 plus staff for various infractions. And the reason being that there will always be these bad eggs. But if we will sustain what I call a recruitment process that is not interfered with by the politicians to bring in their so-called constituents, we will have less of these problems in government agencies. Because most of these people they bring in don't actually believe in the organization, don't actually want the job. They're just looking for a job. They don't even know what the organization stands for. So when they come in, they're looking for opportunities for money. In fact, those days, what I see is that those that come in through those back doors, the first thing they ask is, we want to go to license center. You will see politicians calling me, this is my consent, he wants to be posted to license center. Once I get that request, I post the person in the opposite direction because I know that they're looking for where to go and extort money. So I think interference in recruitment, the so-called empowerment of people using government jobs, for me, is the greatest crime that the democracy has wrought on Nigeria. Using government jobs as empowerment. It is evil. It is likely to cause the decay and destruction of the Nigerian state, because government agencies, government work is a work that people have to have the passion for. People are looking for security. People that believe in the country. When General Onwa joined the army, they didn't join because they knew anybody. They took the NDA exams and their names were published in the newspapers. Those are the finest officers you see in Nigeria. But today we have officers who don't want to fight. That's why we can't fight Boko Haram. We have SSS officers who can go to the war front because that's not why they joined the organization. They joined because they wanted to go where they will sit and make money. So I think that recruitment process is the challenge of the Nigerian state today. And the greatest disappointment I think we have with the governments, both past and present, is failure to fix the issue of recruitment, bringing in a transparent recruitment process. So I think that those FRSC officers, the call should continue its effort to weed them out, and people should continue to report them. Today's of cameras, capturing people asking for money is helping. So the public should continue to play a watchdog role on government agencies. So I've spoken about the sustainability, But in sharing this knowledge with other people and other agencies, there is a challenge I have seen. That challenge is the fact that those of us who are positive-minded, who are not cynical, who believe in decency, who believe in innovation and thinking through and getting people to envision, people kind of show us as dreamers, as people who are not realistic, as people who are not good for the Nigerian environment. One of the sad things I always hear about people is that they said, you are too refined for this system. Oh, you are too good for this politics. And I feel sad for those Nigerians who say that. I am not going to be apologetic that I'm not a thug. I'm not going to be apologetic that I'm not daft. I'm not going to be apologetic that I can't speak, that I speak wrong tenses and wrong grammar. I won't be apologetic that I haven't gone to EFCC or that I haven't stolen government money and been arrested and charged to court. I'm not going to be apologetic about that. And I think Nigerians should honor those who do that and not refrain in saying that, you know, no, leave this thing for these ruffians. So for me, one of the greatest joy I had with President Biden winning is that decency has its reward. That people that speak truth to power, that people that behave nice, that people who are good to people. My officers eat on the same table with me. My officers, I go to command and I visit the commanding officer's house. Some of my commanders lose their family members now that I left FRSC. I went all the way to Kano to attend the funeral. The fact that you are decent should not be a minus. So why I'm saying this is that in transferring this knowledge, most people write it up by saying, don't mind Osita and his long grammar. Don't mind Osita and his idealism. This is not Nigeria. The reality is that Nigerians is for ruffians. Yes, Nigeria is for ruffians and we all can be rough. But what is important is that that culture of decency, that culture that when you saw FRSC staff and they talked in with their uniform well ironed, all imitating me, the young officers wanted to look like me. They wanted to dress decently. The fact that people wanted to, you know, move around with pride in their uniform is the kind of thing we want to see. So transferring it to other agencies is the fact that the Nigerian public must begin to say, these are the kind of qualities we want. That's what the Americans said in the last election by voting for Biden, by saying, we just want decent people to rule our country. And that's what we want in Nigeria, decent people to run our country.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, this is the absolute first time in God knows how long I've been doing these dialogues that I have exceeded the published time. I never do it. And we have exceeded it by more than 34 minutes. One, because the issues are quite engaging and so on. So let me give you, the final words before we close for today. I have resisted from talking about the Anambra 2017 elections because this is not a political discussion. But if the spirit moves you to talk about it, that's up to you. And then, what are you doing these days? And, what does the future look like?
First one is that I've gone to get a law degree. I've always dreamt of being a lawyer. So I finally have a law degree, and I hope to go to the Nigerian Law School as soon as I can. But doing that, I've also established myself in the transport space. So we've been doing transport consulting, driver trainings, and we've been doing driver verifications, especially for commercial fleets, for those who have large fleets. I've been advising them on how to keep their fleet safe, knowing that it will, transport safety is an area of specialty for me in my whole both aviation and
you have
road.
2 degrees in it, right?
Yes, and in transport safety. So it's an area that I am very passionate about. It's an area that I have given my life to. This January, I've spent most of it on the Transport Research Board conference in DC. It was virtual this year, the 100 years of TRB. And the areas of interest remains road safety, safety of the transportation networks. And I believe that a lot can be done if we can think through our transportation vision in Nigeria. Suddenly, everybody is talking about rail. We're spending billions of dollars in debt in rail. I'm one of those who feel that while we need to invest in rail and in the future, but we must first of all come back to making our roads work. Nigeria is not such a large country. The highest distance you will go is from Sokoto to Yenagoa. And by flight, that's about a 1 hour, 20 minutes flight. In some countries, for 5 hours, you'll be flying within a country. But in Nigeria, there's nowhere you can do 2 hours flight between 2 points. And that's because, so that means that it speaks to the fact that our key corridors in Nigeria, the food belt of Nigeria coming from Kaduna, Akwanga, Lafia, going down to Makurdi to Nsukka, we need to dualize those highways and make them safe and connecting it to Port Harcourt. We need to continue to Jebba, Mokwa, Bida Road and connecting it down. And we need to make sure we are linking this to our key airports to make sure that goods coming from the ports, goods coming from the airports can be dispersed easily. And finally, we need to build our rail backbone in such a way that while the colonial government built it from the north to the south was to allow them extract from Nigeria. But what we need today is to cross Nigeria diagonally and go through the middle of Nigeria to be able to move humans and goods, not in any way of extraction, but in way of ensuring movement. So I think that we need to rethink our whole transport space, and I'm happy that I keep sharing my opinion with those in position of authority. I do that quite a bit to getting them to think about it. But talking about Anambra in 2017 goes back to the root of what I said earlier on. We must transition our politics. The fact that every politician in Nigeria has to shell out, you have to be looking for 50 billion naira of your own money to run for president. And if you want to be a governor, somebody advised me that I need to go and raise 4 billion naira and have it cash and get ready to run. That is only money that will determine it. Yes, money is essential in politics, but the problem is that the Nigerian middle class has refused to do what the middle class does all over the world. It is the middle class that fund politics. It is the contributions of the 10 nairas, the $10, the $5, the 1,000, the 50,000 that makes up for what politicians use, so that capable middle class people like Barack Obama can think of being president. But in Nigeria, we have no choice but to go back to retired generals. We have no choice but to go back to former governors. The governors will loot the state and use the money and come back and run for another election. And we keep asking ourselves, why is Nigeria not making progress? So I don't hold the politicians responsible. I hold the Nigerian public responsible for sitting down and clapping and edging on politicians and thinking that the best way to be a politician is to loot whatever agency you have. So they will tell you, oh, he has resources to run the election. All over the world, resources are gotten from people contributing. Even somebody like Narendra Modi. Modi is a very poor man by any standards anywhere in the world, but he's been president in India twice now. So I think we need to rethink that. And that was what the Anambra governorship experience was, to show the fact that we can combine technology, we can combine hard work, we can combine public, and Patrick, you played a major role in getting the public, but our people still don't get it. They're still thinking that there is somebody somewhere who have to determine who gets what. Nobody anywhere determines it. As the NSAS campaign has shown, if we mobilize, if we put ourselves together, if we contribute too much to it, we can achieve any result we want. And I believe that 2023, Nigeria will be offered an opportunity for the middle class to retake Nigeria. If the middle class can come together, and if we have 1,000 naira contribution from 1 million Nigerians, which I'm sure is possible, 10,000 by 1 million Nigerians, he will have enough money. That candidate will win the ticket of any of the two political parties. That candidate will win the general election. And that is my most important message this time around. I'm going to keep pushing that message. The middle class should reclaim Nigeria. There are no more former heads of states like Buhari and Obasanjo. Buhari is going to be the last. There are no more former military rulers who will sit in a conclave and determine what will happen to Nigeria. The onus is now on all of us who are in our 40s and 50s and 60s to determine the trajectory of the new Nigeria. And that trajectory, all the prognoses are faulty. All the lights are blipping red. So we need to quickly reclaim this ship and navigate it to safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Osita Chidoka, for availing us your time and your experience in this discussion, which I'm sure we will continue in some way, shape, or form until we figure out the answers on how to transform our public service. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And to everyone who joined, thanks a lot.